Okay, seems I was a little muted there. I think you can hear me now. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak today on the elements of mentoring in STEM. IUPUI has been a tremendous host, and I have greatly enjoyed interacting and having a mentoring dialogue with you all. Today, I'm going to share some of my experiences over my career and key elements that have served me since I was a graduate student all the way up to Dean. I'm going to try to share my screen at this time. Screen, let's see. Why am I? And I need to start it. Okay. And can everyone see?
That looks great.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, let's see if everything works. Oops, did we jump to here? Okay. All right. So elements of mentoring is in the theme. And so I'm going to go through and approach this by giving attention to the mentors that I've had. I probably need to let me mute my video because I get distracted with that. Okay. So different points in my career, I've been fortunate to have good mentors. My UGA research mentor, Dr. Michael Duncan, who really instilled in me the proper way to do science and the ethics required in pursuing the unknown in the field. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about Dr. Lewis Dale, who very early in my career took the time to show me the ins and outs of scientific funding and the way to pursue and maintain that funding with proper grant management. After graduation, I then took a position at Oakwood University as assistant professor. And that opportunity to work with Dr. Emerson Cooper, I went from faculty to chair to dean. And Dr. Cooper was himself a pillar of the Oakwood University community. In fact, my office is in the Cooper complex. Okay, so I think we lost something here. So I will have to do it manually. Okay, here we go. So my graduate school years. It's probably similar to many of your years. The research was so cutting edge, it seemed like science fiction to me. I was on the ground floor of a new world of research. Dr. Michael Duncan presented a seminar on the work that he was doing and what he was planning to do at the University of Georgia. He was a junior faculty member at that time, and he was starting his second year when I started at University of Georgia. He had graduated from Rice University in Texas, and his presentation was very exciting. He was conducting metal cluster research. He was using lasers, molecular beams, clusters, and very low temperatures. It seemed to me like science fiction. You know, going where no man had gone before, Star Trek, you know, and so I visited his lab, spoke to him and asked to join his lab. And I couldn't wait to see if he was going to accept me. And eventually he said yes. And so that began my journey. And so this is me when I graduated long ago and far away. And this is Mike Duncan at a recent ACS meeting. And I worked in physical chemistry, which is at the intersection of chemistry, medicine, biology, and physics. And of course, the Georgia signature there. Okay, so my research dealt with creating metal clusters. So we'll take a laser and focus it on a metal rod, and the power of that laser will vaporize the metal and form a plasma. Now, you know, plasma is the fourth state of matter, and so it's very superheated matter. And things that happen up in outer space with the stars and so forth. And so we'll cool them down, and we'll see these peaks that we call magic numbers. We were interested in these because this is how atoms become bulk material that we can touch and feel. So you go from 2 to 3 to 4 and so forth. And you see some peaks there at 7, right, and 10. And so we'll probe these peaks to see how they evolve into the bulk material that we can interact with, and see how the properties of the different elements emerge. So the properties that they have, they allow them to affect the reactivity of these elements. So on the left is a spectrum from Rick Smalley back in about 85, 86. And in this, he had published it, and it showed a peak at 60. You see that big peak? That peak was at C60, so 60 carbon atoms in that peak. This comes directly from his data, and he, in that publication, claimed that he had found a new form of solid carbon, right? So, I mean, everyone knows, right? There are only 2 forms of solid carbon, right? And it's graphite, and the second one is diamond. So we saw that, and we looked at it, and we sort of chuckled. And then Rick Smalley visited UGA for a seminar where he verbally shared this data and reiterated the claim of this being a new form of carbon. Very few of us in the room really believed him at that time. I mean, for what, a couple hundred years, people had studied carbon, and everybody knew there were only 2 forms of carbon, graphite and diamond. So our assumption was, hey, this is nothing new. I mean, this is garbage, right? And we sort of rolled our eyes and chuckled, right? I mean, a new form of carbon after so long, and all the books, all the textbooks, everything said, look, there are only 2 forms of carbon. And for Rick Smalley to say that there are 3 forms. Now, let me just throw in here that Rick Smalley was the guy who trained Mike Duncan, who is my PI at the time, right? Or my mentor. Well, we forgot about this data until a few years later. And then we got news from the Nobel announcement that he and his group had received the Nobel Prize in chemistry. This was 1996, right? For discovering a new form of carbon. We were kind of in shock, to say the least, okay? So now Mike Duncan was his graduate student, and I was Mike's graduate student, so I guess that made me his research grandson. So I'm the grandson of a Nobel laureate. Okay, so the ironic thing is that just as we had made that assumption, Cox and Caldo from Exxon were doing the same type of experiments. There are only about 6 labs in the world doing this research. And so we all pretty much knew each other. And so Cox and Caldo at Exxon was also vaporizing graphite rods and looking at the spectra. Do you see in the middle of in the middle there at C60, at the 60 number, that big peak? Well, a year before, they had published, Cupps and Callow had published this paper identifying the peak, but they did not they looked at it and did not think about it being a new form of carbon. They just assumed that it was garbage because, like everybody knew, there are only two forms of carbon. And so they lost out on a Nobel Prize because of the assumption that they made. Take home message, be careful about your assumptions, okay? So again, new discovery, right? So this was discovered by accident, as you can tell, right? But the key is here, accidental discoveries happen to those prepared to recognize them, okay? Have a vision, right? Because things happen. And sometimes the most important thing you can find is when the experiment didn't go the way that you wanted it to, expected it to go. That when the experiment failed, that's when you really have big discoveries. Okay, so this then became the birth of a new technology. We didn't know it at the time, we were calling them clusters, but this is how nanotechnology came about. Back in the 1980s, we were doing this research, there's a few labs, and so later on it grew into the technology called nanotechnology. So, and the takeaway here is that even when we are faced with empirical evidence that shows the inadequacy of certain truths we live by, rarely do we look at the underlying suppositions that led us to embrace the truth in the first place. And it's hard to go back to our foundational assumptions and start over if we even consciously saw them in the first place. It's much easier to keep walking with our assumptions firmly intact. So we had the facts, we all had the facts and everything else, but we just knew that there couldn't be something new under the sun, like a new form of carbon. And so we couldn't accept it even when the evidence was there. This is my graduate mentor, Mike Duncan, okay? This is an incomplete list of the tasks I perform as a grad student in Mike's lab. You can see them on the left. And I have a question for you. How many of you are giving your students the opportunity to participate in non-experimental activity in your labs? Just think about it. How many? Any of you have a lab? How many of you are giving your students or your grad students the opportunity to participate in non-experimental things in your lab? All right. So if you're not, let me encourage you to include them in reviews, in writing, in editing of articles, and expose them to the intricacies of how the lab is run, because that becomes invaluable. These so-called soft skills in the lab are essential. They're an essential part of their training and leads to well-rounded, prepared, competent researchers. Okay, these are some of the things that folks don't think about. They're so busy doing everything and having the students do the experimental work. So in many ways, Mike had to do this as I was his second graduate student. So he leaned on me in getting the lab up and running because he was only in the second year. And I'm proud of the work that we did and the training I received. Many years later, during a graduate school tour, when my son was looking to choose an institution where he wanted to pursue his PhD, of course, I took him to UGA, and he met with Mike and the grad students in the lab. And one of his current students, when he met me, he said, "Oh, they were looking for some answers, and they had some questions about some of the research, and they went and pulled out my lab book and was able to find the results that they were looking for in my lab notebook." And so good training and mentoring causes a ripple effect that can help your lab after the original training is done, okay? The next person I'm going to talk about is Dr. Lewis Dale, okay? Well, shortly after I joined Oakwood as an assistant professor, I was introduced to Louis Dale, a mathematics professor and PI at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, UAB. Well, he was already well known in his field and in the grant world because he had gotten several grants before. But he involved me as a young early career professor to collaborate with them on writing a grant that was newly announced by the National Science Foundation called LSAMP, or the Lewis Stokes Alliance for the Minority Participation. And this grant came out in 1991, and we were funded, okay? And we've been continuously funded from that time until its 30th anniversary last year, 2021. With our state version, it was recognized, the Alabama LSAMP was recognized by NSF as the best in the nation during that time. If you ever had a chance to work with Dr. Dale, he's old school, okay? There's several things that will strike you immediately. He's not a man to mince words. He's crystal clear in his expectations professionally, and he's particular in details and quality. His rule for undergrads in the summer bridge program that they have was to be on time. So they had to be there 10 minutes before, otherwise they were late. And then if it happened too many times, he will fine them during the summer and reduce their stipend, right? He made sure even with us, the partners, the co-PIs on the grant, he made sure we got there on time. If we got there late, he would look at us and stop the meeting, and also, say, oh, you're late, you finally got here, and things like that. So he was very meticulous in how he ran his grant. And you can see some of the things that I learned from him on the left, okay? These characteristics I got from him, rigor and expectations, these all affected me. They caused me to push for the best from those I was affiliated with, and I think he was a factor in this STEM success as an institution. In fact, I owe a lot to him for his training in the millions now of dollars in funding that we've had together from the STEM research and some of the STEM collaborations that we've had. So just with Dr. Dale alone, Oakwood has received millions of dollars in addition to the other research that we don't collaborate on. So these are some of our students from our summer bridge program. So this is, we typically get about 10 to 20 students. We bring them in to live on campus for 2 weeks. They have lectures on chemistry, biology, math, and English. In fact, the teachers who teach the classes in the fall cover the first 2 or 3 chapters with them. So they get a head start and they're allowed to register while they're on campus. So they live on campus, they get a chance to eat in the caf and they get a chance to see what the campus is like before school begins. The past 2 bridge programs have been conducted online due to COVID. And so that's the box on the right is our last one, 2021, where we had students virtually because of COVID. Our next person is Dr. Emerson Cooper, and he was the chair of chemistry at the time. So Dr. Cooper, he is the one responsible for my career as a faculty member at Oakwood. I started out, in fact, he specifically went to the president of the university and said, we must hire Dr. Hing. So I came in as assistant professor. I was promoted to associate professor and then finally professor, right? And this was all because of Dr. Cooper. And you can see all of the things I learned from him and the things he helped me with. So he sort of groomed me for this. And you can see the progression, okay? And then eventually from faculty member, I became chair of the department. I was the chair of the department for 20 years, maybe a little over 20 years. And then about 5 years ago, I was asked to be the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, which is the largest school at the institution, consisting of 7 departments and almost half the population of Oakwood. And so, as was mentioned before, I stayed there until this school year. And I stepped down because we received a new grant from NSF, the third HBCU implementation grant. And in that grant, we involve faculty. It's to improve the research of faculty and to prime STEM students to go on to receive PhDs in STEM. So the last time we met, which was a little over 2 years ago, these are 2 of my STEM students who presented, and they won first place in one in the life sciences and one in the physical sciences. And the middle person between the 2 students with the awards, she is now the PI at University of Alabama, which is in Tuscaloosa. And the left-hand picture is since 1992, we have had what's called Science Day, and approximately 400, sometimes even more than that, will attend each year. And they come from the local elementary, middle, and high schools. And so they get a chance to do experiments hands-on as real researchers, and they're mentored by our students at Oakwood, our STEM majors. So in the last picture on the right is a class of 2020, which had 70% placement in graduate and professional school before they even marched or graduated. And out of the 30% left over that did not go, these students were recruited either by industry and one even by the FBI. So we have a pretty good record of sending students who graduate or placing them into either professional schools or getting them jobs. So we need to talk a little bit now about implicit bias, because remember the assumptions we make, right? So implicit biases are unconscious attitudes and stereotypes that can manifest themselves even in the criminal justice system, in the workplace, in the school setting, and even in the healthcare system. Implicit bias is also known as an unconscious bias. There are many different examples of implicit biases, and they range in different categories such as race, gender, and sexuality. These biases arise as a result of our brains trying to see patterns and to manage the lot of data it has to process in a very complicated world. And so it's affected by culture, media, upbringing, and also they also contribute to the development of such biases. So if you look at this slide, how do we fall short when we take this shortcut of making assumptions, right? You can see some of the biases. We tend to seek out patterns, and implicit bias occurs because of the brain's natural tendency to look for patterns and associate them with the world that we live in. Now, let me just say at this point that implicit bias does not mean that you're prejudiced, because it is unconscious bias. And so it affects the things we do, it affects the decisions we make, and we do it just out of what the assumptions we make. And so let's just revisit our assumption, right? Assumptions affect other things beside the Nobel Laureate Prize. They affect how we interact with each other and the opportunities our students get. Okay, and you can see there what our assumption was, right? But we were wrong, because we made an assumption on what was published in the books. But no one had ever seen the types of things we were doing. Remember, this was novel research. No one knew about the nanotechnology and things like that. And so we were really trailblazers at that time. And so later on, they understood that the reason why they didn't see them was they were so small that they couldn't interact and study them. And that's the reason why we were looking at clusters. So let's look at some real life assumptions. So let's look at the first two side by side. And maybe a couple people can either unmute and tell me what's wrong with, let's say, the first one, okay? What is the assumption here? Well, think about it a little bit, okay? So the assumption is that this girl had a baby. The Black one had a baby, but the other one didn't even think, on the left, it didn't even occur that it might be that lady, the girl's baby. So once you see that the assumption that's made, just look at the second one. Right? So the question is, will you be the first person, right, to graduate from high school? So you see how these unconscious biases or implicit biases, which manifest themselves in seemingly innocent questions, right? And so it may seem natural to you asking the question, but to the person that the question is being asked to, they see something totally different, right? Again, it's all in perception. And that's also due to culture, because if you keep seeing negative things about you, then you become sensitive to those and you catch them very quickly, okay? So let's look at these last two. Right. Do you have any kids? Or how many kids do you have? Right. What is the assumption? Again, what does a husband do? Is the father still in the picture?
How many female scientists have to explain that they're doctor? That's not their husband.
Right. So the thing is, it happens also in the workplace, right? How many female, right, scientists is assumed not to be the doctor, but your spouse is the doctor, okay? And so these biases creep into everyday experiences and often go unnoticed, but the person who it happens to remembers it vividly, okay? So what part do our assumptions play in our worldview? And I'm getting close to the end, so you have time to ask questions. Okay, so this happens all the time. Even in facial recognition, there are problems. Okay, they're still trying to fix them. That's why they thought a lot of cases, because there are problems with people of color. If you have a darker skin, then the likelihood of it being a false positive is a lot greater, and especially for women of color. And what the scientists say is that, we don't have a large enough base to work with, okay? So if you program into a computer biases, you will get biases out. The computer will draw and learn from that, and it become biased, just like the person who had inputted the data. And the same thing goes for training, right? And so we have to be very careful with even trusting artificial intelligence, especially now that a lot of companies are switching to that to reduce costs, okay? So then I like to do this poll, right? So I have a few questions here. The first question is, have you ever had a Black teacher in elementary school? And just raise your hand in the poll so that we can get an idea. If you ever had a Black teacher in elementary school. Okay, I know you're all from different places, but just out of curiosities. And so we'll, Dr. Roper will count the numbers in the chat for me. Just raise your hand and we'll see. And we take this in a quick poll.
It looks like we had two out of about 10 that had a Black teacher in elementary school.
All right, let's go now to it having a Black science teacher in elementary school.
That is a 0. I see no hand. Oh, yep. Maybe one.
Okay, that's good. Okay. The next question is: did you attend a minority private school or predominantly minority elementary school? And that's for the first. That's for the first question. That's part 3 of the first question. It's for elementary school. Was it a private school or predominant? For those who raise their hand, of course.
We have one person.
Attended, okay. Interesting, right? So let's do the same thing now for high school. How many of you attended a high school and had a Black teacher in high school? Of any kind, any doesn't matter what subject, just of any kind, high school.
It looks like we had about 3 out of our group that had
okay. And let's now do it for science. Black high school science teacher.
It looks like nobody had a Black high school science teacher.
Okay, what about college? A Black professor in college.
We've had 4 people that have had a Black professor in college.
Okay, that's 4 out of 10?
Yep.
Okay, what about science?
It looks like we've had 2 out of 10 that have had a Black science teacher in college.
That is overrepresenting compared to national average. Okay, the next question then is, was the institution a HBCU or a minority serving institution? For those who did have.
So far, the answers are no.
Oh, that's very impressive. Oh, that's fantastic. That is more than the national average. I'm impressed, okay? And so without having the right mentors, it's very difficult to change the narrative, okay? But mentorship can, like we mentioned, that we discussed yesterday, right? You can cross-mentor, right? You can have a minority as the mentee. So good mentorship, right, is colorblind. So the takeaway here is good mentorship is colorblind. You can do a good job. The thing is to try to have the mentee change their thinking. Okay, so their unconscious biases may prevent them, right, or maybe they're limiting factor. So if you can encourage them to be that they can be whatever they want to be, you can change that narrative. Okay, so this is Oakwood University, right? And of course, it's an HBCU. And you can see and hear, these are some of the things that we that we're noted for. Okay, you can see on the top left corner, national champion several years in the 100 All-Star challenge, right? Next to that, listed number 8 in the top medical programs in Alabama, ranking medical colleges. Okay, below that, ranked number 1, HBCU science program by Ebony Magazine, right? Underneath that, Oakwood University ranked number 8 in top 10 HBCUs, right? US News, right? You see that, historically Black colleges and universities, best regional college value, right? One of the nation's best educational institutions in the South. And of course, we have the usual things, sports, right? Ambassadors, 4-time champions, Division I, USCAA. And then, of course, singing. Our Aeolians are known worldwide. We had three gold medals in the 10th World Choir Games in 2018 in South So in 2017, we were the Choir of the World into International Music in Wales, Festival in Wales. So you can see we are a well-rounded institution and we prepare students for whatever they want to do. Okay, of course, there are 50 countries represented. Okay, ranked one of the best retention and graduation rates among HBCUs in the nation. And so let's go to my last slide. So this is a study that was done of the best US universities where their graduates go on to get doctoral degrees in STEM. And of course, these are national, not just HBCUs, it's national. And so you can see some of the usual schools there, right? A lot of HBCUs in the top, right? The usual suspects, Florida A&M, Spelman, Xavier, University of Maryland is there. Okay, and then Hampton. Then you see Tuskegee, and below that, MIT, right? 18 is Georgia Tech. And go down to number 22, City University of New York, Louisiana State University, and lo and behold, Oakwood University. Number 22, right? We have 1,500 total students now. That's some of the classes or majors at the majority institutions have more students than that. Look at the other schools on the list and take a guess as to their size in comparison to Oakwood, as far as resources and endowments and things like that. Okay, the difference is the way we mentor our students. Okay, we don't have any graduate program in STEM at Oakwood. No in-house PhD STEM programs yet. But we do send our students to graduate schools to undergo, to get PhDs. I'm hoping that because of this, maybe some of our students will make their way up to Indianapolis, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's a natural fit for us, right? I mean, we get recruits from all over the country. I mean, for a medical program, Mayo just formed an agreement with Oakwood for early acceptance, right? Guaranteed acceptance, guaranteed seats. The same thing happened to University of Pennsylvania, to UAB. I mean, to several John Hopkins, right? So we have lots of agreements with other schools, and I think this is a good fit where we can have some of our students come to your institution, right? In fact, one good way to do that is if you have an REU. So that's something to think about. If you have an REU, then we can have students come to you during the summer, right? So that's one of the things that I thought we could do. So finally, again, I'm gonna stop sharing, right? Let's now stop for questions and answers. Okay, so I'd like to thank you all for a wonderful couple of days this week. I really enjoyed meeting and talking to you all, and I hope this isn't the last time we'll interact. My email is there for everyone who would like to get it. Again, thank you for the honor and opportunity to present to you about my journey and my mentorship. I wish you all the best in your careers and research. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hing. We really appreciate it. And if I could start out with just a question. So, so besides, I mean, you mentioned having an REU, and that would help to encourage minority students to come to Indianapolis. What other kinds of things, mentoring types of things, or what other kinds of changes could we make to encourage more minority students to come to Indianapolis?
Have relationships with minority institutions that are close to you, or even high schools that have kids that are minority students, right? That's a low cost thing. So form those relationships like we do with our summer bridge program, right? And also we have our science day, where the kids come to campus from elementary school all the way up to high school to visit our campus. So they get a chance to see. So have summer camp a week or a couple of days, day camp. Come for a couple of days, and you can charge a minimum amount or even have it for free, especially if it's a minority student. Start low and we'll build up, okay? And preferably local, so that there's less investment involved. So I think there must be area high schools and elementary schools and things like that. So I would say start in your vicinity and get that word out, and then you can spread out to other institutions. Okay, and this gives parents something to do with their kids while during the summer, so they get some enrichment and everything else. Yeah.
I have a question. We have some of that in place where we do like some work and outreach work with high schools and with minority serving institutions. But one of the things that we continue to struggle with, and we work on it as a campus, is the campus culture. So tell me any advice you may have in shifting culture to being more inclusive, to having a growth mindset, to having to really embracing these students, to embrace our students and say, hey, you have a place here. We created this place and we really want you to be here.
Excellent question. Remember a lot of the stuff that I end with, implicit biases, unconscious biases? You have to address that. Because if you bring them on board, you bring them in campus, and then they're treated badly, they don't want to come back, right? So you have to have frank conversations and question your decisions, with faculty, with staff, and everyone, that, well, why are you making the decision that you're making? Or why are you taking this defense or this stance, right? So, and of course, the administration have to buy into this, because if the administration doesn't buy in, then there is no incentive for them to change, right? So, again, meet with the community to see what some of the things that meet with parents of, and find out why is it that we don't have more applications or applicants from people locally and things like that, right? So you have to come get to the bottom of or the reason why they're not coming. And one of the reasons that we found is this implicit bias. They don't feel there's a place there for them. Okay, and so and if they come and it's reinforced, then why do I need to be there? And that's what we try to change the narrative of students visiting Oakwood. Okay. This is a place where you're welcome. You can feel at home, right? And this is where you want to be. This is the best learning environment for you. And also, there are role models. But like I mentioned yesterday, being a role model to a minority mentee just takes a little different mindset. You have to accept them for who they are, and believe in them. Because for most of their life, based on what they see, based on the interactions, it has been negative. The stereotypes. And it's a reality. And so that has been the missing thing for a lot of institutions. I mean, you can get as many workshops and everything else, but if you don't get buy-in from the faculty and from the people in charge, or who meet the students and things like that, you're not going to have any change. You're gonna reach an equilibrium, just like it was mentioned earlier in one of our other meetings. And so you recruit some, but those who didn't have a good experience, they're going to be moving through. Just walking through and go, and then you have to do the same thing over again. So you have to be deliberate and intentional about it until you get a critical mass. Because once you get a critical mass, then they start recruiting for you. That's what happened to us at Oakwood, right? The Hispanics, that's the fastest growing population right now. Of course, we recruited a few of them. So I say about five or so percent, right, came in, and now they're recruiting for their friends because of the experience they have here. We hired recruiters who are Hispanic, right, and our enrollment has tripled as far as Hispanics are concerned. They're contacting us to come. Okay, and you're telling it to friends and families.
Pam, did you have a question?
No, but now I do.
Okay.
Just about what you just said. You said you recruited some, did you mean students or faculty? Students.
We have just a few faculty, but we have recruiters who are Hispanic. They're the ones that go out and meet them.
Okay.
And so now we have a critical mass. So when they come now, they see the other people that look like them on campus and say, wait a second, I'm okay here, right? In fact, their whole families relocating to Huntsville right now because they want to be near their kids because they're such tightly knit that the families are moving now to Huntsville. So yes, it can be done. And so if we waited to see if we could to hire, Hispanic faculty and stuff, we never do anything. But we decided to recruit them as students now, and we have professional recruiters. And so when they come and they see the other people that look like other students that look like them, we have a few faculty, right? And they even have a group that they meet, like maybe every other week. And so they're a very close-knit community.
So, but when you say then you recruited and then they were by word of mouth sharing with their friends, that must mean then that it's because they had a good experience. Exactly.
They felt at home.
You have to have a good experience for them.
Absolutely. They feel welcome. They feel that we want them there.
Yeah.
If they don't feel good, students are good that way, that they spread that word. They will let their friends know, hey, I don't like this place, such and such and such and such. So the key is they have to have a good experience. If they have a good experience, then they say, hey, this is great, you need to be here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a powerful thing because if, a school is trying really hard to increase enrollment, then maybe they should prioritize.
Yes.
Sure, their students have a good experience and feel welcome.
Exactly.
Cam, you said a mouthful with that, especially.
I know.
Yes.
You must have a product. You must have a product.
That's right. It's easier to sell a good product, right? So
Exactly. And that's why it's tripled in the past like couple of years.
Other questions? Do people have other questions? If you want, you can put them in the chat and I will read them. We'll try to make this as easy as possible. Oh, here we go. One in the chat. Okay. So what things are those students looking for? What things are the Hispanic students looking for? What things are the Black students looking for? That's a question
Okay.
in the chat.
Personalized care for one, right? Now the majors are all over the place, right? Throughout, right? But they want to know that they're wanted, that people care about them. If they have a problem, that they have someone they can go to, and you know, it wouldn't get lost in the shuffle, right? That's what every student wants, to feel heard, right? And if you have a problem, that someone addresses it in a timely manner. And the other thing is like you know, in chemistry department, our little saying is, you know, join the chemistry department. This is where bonds are formed. You know, we are family. You know, and so yeah.
yes, covalent bonds.
Of course, it's not a polar covalent, it's just a covalent equal sharing. You know, we care about the whole person, okay, and the outcomes, because I mean, we want them out as soon as feasible. The other thing is we provide those who may have some language problems. We provide people who can help them with that. Because some of them, you know, they need some help with the language, right? And then we can, you know, in chemistry, we can then say, hey, look, we have 100% placement rate. In fact, right now, all of our graduates have already been accepted to schools for the fall. Duke, Notre Dame, right? UAB, UCLA, you know, I mean, and it's not just HBCUs they go to major institutions. In fact, we have faculty almost every other week coming from different institutions to talk to our students. And hopefully we get some people from you guys to come down and talk to our students for your graduate school. Right? You know, before, you know, like they used to say, oh, Oakwood is the best kept secret. Well, the word is getting out. And I don't want to be the best kept secret. That's not why we're here.
We just bought Tabitha and Cam a plane ticket down there, so they'll be coming soon.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Great. Thank you so very much, Professor Hing. We really appreciate your words and your staying to answer these questions. This has been fantastic. And thank you everybody for joining us for our 2022 Trailblazers and Innovators. We're grateful for all the experiences we've had these past couple of days and what we've learned. And we're looking forward to using these things and to making IUPUI just a little bit better.
Thank you very much for having me, and you know, God bless and keep safe, okay, and good luck with getting more minority students at your institution, and we'll try to help you as much as we can. So you have my email address and so forth. We love collaborations. I mean, you know, like, hey, and like I said, I even I've gone up during the summer to Ohio State. When I send my students up there, because we had I was co-PI on a research grant from NSF on nanotechnology. And so I send my students up there during the summer, and then I'll go up there for a couple of weeks, see what they're doing, and then we come back down and continue the research down in Huntsville, Alabama. Okay, so I know time is fast spent, so Is there anything else before we leave? Well, thank you very much for having me, and
Thank
be
you.
careful, folks. Enjoy, and good luck with your recruitment and so forth, enrollment.
Thank you. That's
Have a good day.
fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Good seeing you.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Thank you. We will definitely
Okay.
be in touch soon, actually.
Okay. Like old times, right?
Mhm.
Take care, folks.
All right
Okay,
now.
bye.
All right, bye.